To connect the interface, the first thing I want to do is just start Virtualbox like I've done there. Don't start the virtual machine. Then I want to turn the ignition on the car and then connect the interface. I've got a battery charger, 15 amp battery charger on the car, so I'm going to go and start, or just put the ignition on. So the ignition is on at the moment. I haven't connected the USB yet. I'm now going to connect the interface to the car. And with the interface connected to the car, the indications I've got are just the power light is flashing, and that's all I should have. And then once that's connected, now I'm going to connect the USB to the computer. To actually check that it's actually recognizing it, I'm just going to go to Settings, USB. I can see I've added the Samtec HSX interface as something to join to that, but it doesn't know, or you can't really tell from that it's actually seen it yet. So I'm going to click on the plus, the little USB plus thing here, and I actually see it listed there. So they are the different things that are actually connected to the computer at the moment. So I know that the computer and Virtualbox is actually seeing that there. So I click OK. And now I'm going to start the virtual machine. The way I start the virtual machine is not by clicking start, but I'm going to use the Piwis start batch file, which is going to take the date back to 2019 so I don't end up with the black menu problem. So I click on that and the virtual machine will crank up. Once the virtual machine has started, the first thing I'm going to do is just check that it can actually see the interface. So what I'm going to do is click Start, Control Panel, System, Hardware, Device Manager, and under Device Manager I want to see this lib USB Win32 devices, and if I click on the plus there I'll see HSX interface, so I know that that's good to go. If that's not there, then if you try and start Piwis, it won't see it. If you want a vehicle analysis log, it's going to write it to a place on the C drive on the virtual machine. So to find where that's going to be, I'm going to go to Start, My Computer. I'm just going to click Folders. And then I'm going to go to C, User Data, PIDT. And where it's going to write is in this first one here, is ANSICT, which I think means read or something like that, but it's under this FAP folder. Okay, now here's one that I actually wrote earlier. What it will actually do is it will write to an RAR zip file. So to open that up, which I've done here, when I actually right click on that and go to WinRAR and then go extract here, what you'll then end up with are these three files. And it's actually this one here. You can see it's FAP with my VIN next to it. If I right click on that, because if you just click on that, it won't really, it'll open it in a notepad file, which is pretty much unusable. So what you want to do is go open with, and you can either go Piwis browser or internet browser. And on this is Internet Explorer 8, I think. So you might have to click through a few initial windows to say, hey, get the thing going. But here is the vehicle analysis log, and it is basically every single control unit and every single bit of information in it. Basic ID at the start with your VIN, type of car, etc., etc. But then here are all the control units, and if I want to jump down to an individual control unit to see what, firstly, all the inputs were at the time, etc., then you can just click on one of these and that'll hyperlink to it. So I'll actually just go to the DME for the engine, because this is the only place where I can find where you actually get the over rev data. So you can see initially here you've got the the identification information, and then all the measured values, and there are loads and loads and loads of them. And if you scroll down, you'll eventually get down to, because everything looks like it's in in kind of alphabetical order, but it's not really. But where you see the oil pressure stuff, okay, you can see here the overspeed readings, the number of ignitions, and the number of hours it was at the time. So you can see this car had 116 ignitions in overspeed range 1, and there are none there in 2. And funnily enough, the 3, 4, 5, 6 are actually further down here, and there are none in all the others. So that's where you would go to find stuff inside your vehicle analysis log. I'll show you how to do that in a moment when we open up the software. I would suggest that you make a shortcut of where that FAP file is, or you can just dig down into it if you like. But when you get to that spot in Internet Explorer, you can just right click it, say send to. I'll show you how to do that. So my computer. So user data, PIDT, that first one there, then FAP, and if I right click there and go send to, and then desktop, create shortcut, I'll end up with what I've got here with a shortcut to FAP. So if I make a vehicle analysis log, I can have that straight away. And one of the reasons why you'd want to do that, and I'm actually going to drag that over to the right hand side here, because all the windows and everything end up here to the right. But when I open up Piwis later on, if I create a vehicle analysis log, because it takes up the whole screen, it's close to impossible. I haven't found a way to actually get to this, to the desktop, unless you actually open this first. So if I click on that and open it, then what I can do is just go Alt Tab when Piwis is open, and this window will open, and I can actually go and have a look at that vehicle analysis log. So once you've got the interface connected correctly, and you know that the virtual machine is seeing it, you can click on Piwis 2 and the application will start. Once it starts, a couple of things you need to have a bit of a look at. Initially, you'll see network connection none. Don't worry too worried about that. The validity of imprint, because we've taken it back to the 31st of August 2019, then this should be the same every single time. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to then go into the diagnostics program. A couple of things that I can do to start off with. If you want to change this into a different mode, so for example, this normally runs in the after sales mode, which is V mode. To change that, I go into settings, diagnostic configuration, and then for mine, I'm a 981, so I'm going to use this first option up the top here. If you've got another type that's not listed there, I would choose the other model lines, but I'm going to click in there. And the mode at the moment is V mode, so we can see operating mode is V. If I wanted to change that, don't use P, that's production mode. The thing just dies and you'll have to rebuild the virtual machine. I don't know why that is, but that's just the way it is. If you want to use the mode where you can change some of the coding, that's E mode, okay? And that's actually in German. So I won't do that now, we'll just leave that in V mode and I'll exit out of it. But if you clicked E mode, for example, you would have to come down here, click save, and then exit, and then when you opened up the diagnostics, which we'll do in a moment, that would actually be in that mode. But I'm going to go back, and I'm going to escape out of that. And now I'm going to go into the diagnostics. So I'm going to go up here to diagnostics. For me, it's a 981. I'm across here to 981 and click on that. Now when that's opening, if you look at your interface, it's still flashing with the power, but as soon as it makes the connection, you get the solid USB. And once you've got that solid USB, then you know the interface is actually connected to Piwis and everything should work okay. If you haven't done something right with the connection process, then this solid USB won't light up like that, which means that you need to go and retrace your steps and find out what's gone wrong. But seeing that, that is the happy light. So here we are inside of Piwis where we can start to do some stuff. Basic functionality of the system is the overview gives us all of the control units down the left hand side here. Those are all that could possibly be on a 981. A lot of or some of these aren't going to be in here because they weren't optioned on my car. And along the top here, they're not available at the moment, but they're the different options to see fault memory, activate things, etc. So the first thing I can do is when I'm here, I can either select an individual item like this, like a DME or the transmission control or something like that, and just dig straight into that. Or if I want to find out what units are actually in my car, from this position here, I can just click next or hit F12. I'll click that. Now, it'll give me the option right at the start of each time you jump in here, whether or not I want to create that validation, so that vehicle analysis log. So if I click yes, then that's going to be F12. What it's going to do is then start the vehicle analysis log. It'll go through every single control unit, and that'll take about 5 minutes or so. And once it's done that, then it'll say, hey, is this the correct VIN? You check the VIN, say yes, and there's a couple of, you confirm this is the correct VIN, and then once you've done that, then that'll be written to that spot that I showed you before for the vehicle analysis log. I won't do that for the moment, but it's a pretty simple process. So I won't do that, but now it's going to go and find each of the control units. So once the control unit search has been completed, I can actually, there's a bunch of options along the bottom here, but I can, generally what I'm going to do is if I know there is a particular problem, I can then just go into a particular module and look at some things. Let's just go back. The way this all works to actually select either modules or parts of a module, if I click on individual ones, it just builds them up, so I can actually just go into all of those if I want all at the one time. I can de-click those, or if I've selected lots, I can then just hit delete down here, and that'll just take them all away. I can start from scratch, or I can just click and drag the whole lot. Okay, and now I've got all of these options here, so I could actually look at the fault menu for all of those that are selected, which is what I'll do. I can look at the extended identifications, input values, etc., etc. Whilst we're here, we'll just explain what each of these are. Extended identifications just goes a bit deeper into each of the control units and looks at software loads, dates that the software was loaded, etc., etc. Fault memory is obviously the faults that are in there. Actual values and input signals, that is what is the control unit is sensing at the moment, either from another unit, like a door that's open or an engine that's running or something like that, or within like the sensor that's actually directly connected to that control unit. A drive link is where we can go and activate something. Coding is where we're obviously going to change some coding, and maintenance and repairs is where we could go to do certain procedures that are listed inside the workshop manual. For example, oil fill mode for the transmission. So when you first open things up, if you just want to check the car, the best thing to do is, instead of selecting individual units, if you just click next, it's going to go and find all of the control units that are in the car. And once it detects all of the units that are in there, those that don't have letter grade aren't actually in the car. The black ones are actually there. So for example, I don't have tyre pressure monitoring, so there's nothing listed there. But once I'm like that, select all of those, just roll down like that, so it'll only select those that you've actually got. And then if I just go fault memory, it'll go through each of those control units and find what faults are in there. And if there are faults in there, then they will be listed against the control unit. There will be the priority of it here, so how critical it is. 1 is super bad, down to 7 or 8 I think it is, which goes from red down to green. Give you the fault code. It'll tell you whether it's active or not, so if the symbol is greyed out, it means it's not currently active. If you see the words fault memory entries not set, that means there's nothing in there, which is the good thing that you want to see. But obviously that's all looking pretty good that there's nothing in there. If you wanted to then delete all of those, then there's the option down the bottom here to delete FML. So delete those fault codes, and that will just go through and delete all those for you. And now what I'm going to go is go into an individual unit or control unit and have a look at it. So let's go into the transmission. Let's go next. Or you can just click any of those along the top there just to access that one. I can go into extended identifications. And that'll give me a whole bunch of information about it. The software version, when that was loaded, etc. The date of manufacture of the car, or the control unit date of manufacture, etc. I can go into fault memory, which is what we looked at before. There are no entries set. Happy days. I can go into actual values, which tells me all the inputs that are going into it. Now, when you bring up the initial level of actual values, you'll end up with these options here. Some only have a couple, some like the DME for example have a whole raft of them, and these then branch out into a number underneath them. So for example, I can click that one and that one, or I can remove them or whatever, but I'll just open up one of them, just the general. I'll go next, and then it gives me the options of one of the actual options that I can select from that unit. And as you can see from that, just from that one, there's a whole raft of things that I can actually select. So for example, I can, I'll just select a few here just to see what's actually happening. And once I select those, if I select, just say I select it like that, just a couple, I'll end up with a big picture like this. If I end up with, I think it's 5 or more, so I'll select a few more, then I ended up with a big list, so everything's listed on the right hand side, which I actually find a little bit easier. In addition to that, when that's on, so I can actually see each of those things that I selected, the value and what the unit actually is. Down the bottom here, I have the option with F8 of cycling between the minimum, okay, the maximum, or the value, so the current value. Okay, so it'll actually cycle through those. Back. And so each time I go back, I'll go back to the initial level of the submenus that I can choose from. So I might want to read things from there, and there, and there. So if I select those three, then I can bring that up, and that'll actually now list all of those that we had before, which is the top level general, as well as all those others that were underneath it under those submenus. And now I can click the ones that I actually want to look at. So I can click any of those. And then that will list all of those for me. So I can monitor items from different submenus quite easily, and I can actually monitor items from multiple ECUs if I wanted to. So I'll have a look at that now. So every time I come, if I'm going back, if there's a back option, click it. Once I've, like this, I'm actually inside the PDK in this case, but that ECU, I can click any of these along here. But if I want to go back to that top level to list all of the ECUs, then I can click Overview, and now I can go back again sometimes. It's a bit confusing to what the actual logic is, but then you can go back to the top level here. So just say I wanted to monitor the DME and the transmission at the same time, I can click both of those. I can just click actual values and input signals. It'll now list all of the stuff. You can see these are all for the DME, as well as all of these are for the gearbox. So I could then go, well, actually I want to look at stuff from the fuel system and mixture formation, as well as I want to look at the selector lever for whatever reason. So they're from different control units, and then I just go next. and it's listed, all of those, you can see all of those options under those menus that I've selected from the DME as well as the PDK, and now I can go and select however many I want from those different menus or those sub-menus and click next, and there they are, which is a pretty good way to monitor lots of stuff at the same time. All right, let's have a look at so once I'm into some sub-menus, I can now go and plot those if I want. So as I'm driving the car, I can click a bunch of, or actually probably simplest if we just have maybe a couple. And now, once I've got these here, or that big long list that I had before, if there's more than 5, I can now select those. And once I select those, I can click Data Logger, and then it'll ask me, because this is going to graph what the actual data is. So all measured values in one diagram, between individual diagrams, or 2 adjacent diagrams. Let's just do it all in one diagram, but you can go and play with this as required. And now you can see as we go along, I can click Start here, and it's going to plot those values. Now obviously if the car's going, you're checking fuel trims or something like that, then you can monitor that as you go. Buttons that you've got here, we can scroll left to right with the horizontal axis. You can change the zoom, the x-axis over here, or the y-axis over here. The x-axis is always going to be time, and the y-axis is always going to be the parameter that you've selected. If you want to auto zoom it, you just click on that and it'll do that for you and change the axis so it actually works. If you actually want to get a value, so if I just click stop there and then I click this button here, now I can actually look at individual time. So if I click that, it tells me what the time is, and that's in milliseconds, so it's 39.5 seconds since we started, and it actually gives you those values of those 2 things that I actually selected before. So that's the way you would actually get in and look at that stuff. Once you get out of it, to delete the selected log, so let's just get out of that, and then we're back to where we started, and then we can just click back and jump out of each of those. So that's actual values and input signals. For drive link checks, this is where we're going to make things like get activated, and we've got the DME selected at the moment. So I can click drive links, go forward, and now I can activate things. So I can activate the fuel pump, like a whole bunch of stuff in there. So that's just selected the intake flap on the engine. Obviously it's not going to move because there's no vacuum on it at the moment. What I want to do at the moment is select 100%. I can actually select, so the value that you can select, so I can select that, and once I've selected the one that I want, I click execute, and I can actually hear the solenoid operate for me, and then it'll actually tell me what the results are down here. And then the next thing is coding adaptations, and here in after sales mode there's very little that you can actually do. You can go and check what's actually in there. So if I get a manual coding, the first thing that's going to come up is the value of where the country is from, so what country it is, what the manufacture date is, and what type of car it is. You can actually change those if you wanted to. Clearly I'm not going to do that, but then I'm going to click next. And what it's going to give me is all the options that are installed. So you can see for mine, and what's interesting is you can see the PDK, automatic cruise control, etc. But that is all the stuff that is for the PDK. In some instances, it actually shows you stuff that is fitted, but you don't actually have optioned on the car. So for example, I'll show you on front end electronics, because on my car the rain sensor is fitted and it can identify it. So if I click next there, so you can see it actually detects the rain sensor. The rain sensor is there, it gives me a part number and there's no codes or anything. But if I go into coding adaptations and go manual coding and go next, and this one it doesn't actually have the manufacture date in the coding for that particular control unit, which is fine. But if I go next, you'll see that all the options that are selected, and this one here, rain sensor, is actually not installed. So in the factory, because the person who owned this before me didn't pay for the rain sensor, even though all the cars have it installed, the option's not selected. And I think you need, because I've tried many different things with no success, to try and get that ticked so it's installed, and I am unable to. So I think I might have to go to the dealership to hopefully pay some money and get that selected. But that's what's in there. What we'll do now, we'll have a look at the maintenance repairs. So if I just go to overview, we'll have a look at two things which are going to be regular, or not regular, but occasional maintenance items. Let's firstly go into the DME and go maintenance repairs. And you can see there's a whole bunch of stuff here. So if you're bleeding the cooling system, which is something that might often happen when you're changing the coolant or you've had to remove coolant to do some work on the car, it will then step you through, and this is to be read in conjunction with the workshop manual. The next thing that you could do, so let's go back to overview, let's go to transmission control, and this is where oil fill mode is, so we could go into maintenance repairs here. So this is oil fill mode. Okay, so this is what it will talk you through, again, the same procedure to go into oil fill mode. Programming is where you'll actually do programming of individual units, like upgrades if they're actually inside Piwis. So for example, recently I did a transmission, so a PDK upgrade, and you're going to go into programming, and this is something that you would actually want to have the documentation for of how you're actually going to do it. So it will actually talk you through exactly the process, because clearly you don't want to brick your car and you want to have the documentation there that tells you quite specifically what you need to do, and that would come out in the form of a campaign circular or something along those lines. When you want to exit out of the program, click end and terminate yes. If you were to look at the interface now, that solid USB light would go out and you just have the flashing power light. And that brings you back to here. Now you'll notice that I've actually saved all of these icons over to the right and the bottom here, because this automatically comes over on the left. If those icons are all sitting behind here, it's hard actually, because if you hit close, it doesn't close down the whole thing, close down the whole virtual machine. But if you actually just want to get rid of this interface here, you can right click, bring up Task Manager, the desktop, which is actually, as it turns out, this thing here, you click that and just click End Task and that'll go away, and now you have access to those. And then you can go back and start Piwis again down here. And once you get to this stage here, I've found in the past that if I don't disconnect it in a certain order, it can sometimes end up with some errors next time I crank it back up. So the USB is still connected. What I'm going to do is leave the ignition on in the car, so the car's still got power. I'm going to disconnect the interface from the car. So it's now removed, and now I can disconnect the USB, and I can also go and turn the power off to the car.